Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to try and see if I can spotlight. Here we go. Okay, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the Global Annual Conference, Commonwealth Scholarship Commission Conference for Commonwealth Alumni. Today's panel, I am very, very pleased to welcome you today to the session on cultural competence in education, integrating diverse perspectives into the curriculum. Our session today delves into the critical role of embracing diversity and inclusivity within the curriculum, ensuring that students are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and attitudes required to thrive in an increasingly interconnected world. We are honored to have a distinguished panel of experts who will share their insights, experience, and best practices in fostering cultural competence and education within educational institutions. Before we start the discussion, I just wanted to mention that you are able to ask your questions. There is a button at the bottom that says Q&A, and you can put your question in the Q&A section, and the chair will go through them at the end. I also encourage you to save the other remaining sessions of the conference. Tomorrow, we have a very, very good program that includes 2 workshops. One is a careers workshop, and the other one is a diversifying leadership workshop. Both excellent presenters. So do join us tomorrow as well. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Alice, to introduce herself and start the discussion. Alice, over to you.
Thank you so much, Maze. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. A warm welcome to this roundtable today. As Maze had indicated, the roundtable today is on cultural diversity, and we will be discussing cultural competence in education, integrating diverse perspectives into curriculum. In her intro, Maze really pointed out something important around the fact that in an increasingly interconnected world, we get to meet people of diverse cultural identities in classrooms or in common education systems where they have to learn together. And we know that education systems that are able to acknowledge and respond to diversity are best positioned to provide equitable access to education for everyone. So allow me to introduce myself. I'll be your chair today. I'm really honored to be chairing this session. My name is Alice Wekesa. I work with the British Council. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I work as a senior advisor on gender equality. My role is mainly advisory, providing technical inputs to my colleagues on gender equality, but I'm also very much interested in education, and I'm really, really excited about the opportunity to have this conversation. With me are very experienced, distinguished panelists who will also be with us today to be able to take us through the conversations on cultural diversity in the curriculum. I'd like to start off with the introductions for our panelists. Can I start with you, Mariama? If you can come off mic and introduce yourself. Sorry, come off mute.
Hi, as Ali said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Mariama Chow from the Gambia, West Africa. I'm an educationist, a trained teacher. I've worked through the ranks in the education system up to being a principal, and now I've been an administrator, management level at the ministry from 2002 to date with different portfolios. Dealing with policy development, dealing with project management, but as of now, I'm really dealing with continuous professional development of teachers, being head of the in-service education and training of teachers. we're introducing reforms to help teacher competencies. And that's what I have really into. But all my professional life from 1985 to date is in education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariama. Landry, are you able to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Landry Sujira, and I'm based in Rwanda, East Africa. For the past 8 years, I've been working in an education sector. I'm very passionate about education, especially for marginalized communities and displaced people. As I've worked with different higher education institutions in Africa, I started off working for a higher education institution in Rwanda, then also worked for Southern New Hampshire University, and currently also working with the University of Oxford, coordinating an online course they have in refugee and forced migration studies, since that's my MA that I earned from the University of London. And also currently I'm doing work with GIZ in the field of digital literacy and capacity building programs. But overall, my experience is mostly in student support, curriculum design, learning experiences design, as I said, in education, but specifically higher education for marginalized communities and refugees. Thank you.
Thank you, Landry. Nerea, can we go ahead with you introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Nerea Amisio-Kongo, and I call myself an African feminist, but I'm also an educator. I'm based at the University of Manchester. Basically, my background, I'm a human geographer as well. So I teach human geography, which is sort of like covers everything on the surface of the earth. So someone would wonder why a feminist is in geography. So that's what we do. So we deal with things to do with migration, everyday bodies and embodiment, literature, or issues to do with the climate, you name it, you'll find it under geography. I'm very, very happy to be here today, and I do hope that this session will be as fruitful as we plan it to be. And you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Nerea. Last but not least, Tanjilut, do you want to unmute? Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and greetings from Bangladesh. I'm Tanjilut Tasnuba. I'm currently working at the International Labour Organization as a senior program officer. I am, by profession, of course, I'm a development professional. I started my career as a young professional in a very renowned non-government organization, in a very renowned NGO you may know. It's called BRAC, and I served there for more than 7 years. I have been working there in the social innovation field and in the education program. My focus was on the social enterprise model development for the education. From there, I have moved to International Labour Organization, and I have worked there in the skills development sector. I'm working there for last 5 years. Recently, I have taken up some more portfolios of social protection and migration, which all together comes under the jobs and social protection at the world of work. So that's how I overlook, gender, of course, vulnerable groups, gender, and the migrant workers, and social protection and jobs for all. I was also a Commonwealth Scholar. I have completed my master's from University College London on inclusive education, inclusive and special education in 2013. So thank you very much, and nice to meet you all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tanjilut. As you can see, we have a very diverse panelists, and also with very rich experiences, which is really appropriate for the conversation that we want to have today. Before we start, just to reiterate what Mace had indicated earlier, we would really like you to engage with the session. So please use the Q&A tab to share any questions that you may have as we go along the discussions. We will pick them up towards the end of the session so that we can have an opportunity for the panelists to directly respond to the questions that you may have. Yep. So do also like any questions that may be there that you want people to speak to, so that we can also prioritize some of the most liked questions. Now we can formally start the conversation, and we will start with you, Dr. Nerea. And the first question is around strategies. Can you tell us what are some of the strategies that can be employed to ensure that students from diverse cultural backgrounds feel represented and also valued in classrooms?
Thank you, Alex. That's a very, very good question. If I just reflect back on myself as an international student in the UK and what I felt was lacking or what was there for me, because I felt like it was sort of like just being thrown at the deep end and you didn't really know what to do with it. And I remember speaking to my supervisor at that time, and I'd written a very good chapter around feminism, and my supervisor was like, oh, this is so good, but where are you grounding it? How are you grounding this? Like, from what background? I'm like, but I've just written so much about feminism. But then I realized that we were actually both speaking about feminism, but from very, very different perspectives. And that's when now I had to go back and start giving sort of like a background within my research on African feminism. And that's when I realized that, you know, feminism is not universal and cultures are also very, very diverse. And just because we all fall under the umbrella of something or cultural diversity, it doesn't mean that our experiences are the same. And so as an educator within the classroom, I do try to bring international students, or students from very diverse backgrounds, into the everyday teaching process. So the way I do design my curriculum, for example, or my teaching, is that I want it to be very student-led because I want student voices to be there. So one of the things that I do is that using like collaborative online spaces, where like students who feel, because we know that students from diverse backgrounds, sometimes they're not very competent in English, they're not very confident speaking in public, they feel like their experiences are out of place and so they don't belong. And so these online collaborative whiteboards or spaces allow them to then be able to share their perspectives on issues that sometimes are real issues that they're experiencing, for example, like migration. Sometimes they don't really know who to ask about something. And also another thing that I do is that I operate an open door policy. The university does operate an open door policy, and a lot of students who want to research diverse topics or topics to do with maybe refugees, topics to do with Africa, topics to do with indigenous communities, they usually don't know where to go because a lot of universities are also quite understaffed. They don't have like understaffed in the sense that they don't have enough representation for people from minority groups, or like, for example, in my department, I think we're only 2 people who are who are Black, one from the Caribbean and I from Africa. So you can just understand the extent to which like there's not enough competence or skill set or background or somebody with that cultural knowledge or cultural sensitivity to be able to support international students, for example. And also just the British students who also want to then learn more about these diverse cultures, they also then do not have like someone they could go to. So I've sort of like become a de facto place or person who everybody comes to. They want to talk about all these things. So it has been interesting because just seeing students so interested in learning more about diversity and all these cultures is something that we always speak about, but hasn't been really implemented quite well within the classroom. And being a geographer, geography's history particularly is very problematic because you know, it's based around this colonial idea of knowledge production, and these knowledge production spaces don't really welcome diverse voices. They don't really welcome. There is no space for someone, for example, from the African continent to come and say, oh, you know what? Actually, when you people are talking about climate change, maybe we should look at it this way. There is no space for that because we all have these methods and practices and systems that are already in place that have been passed down to us from generation to generation. And that erasure of these indigenous voices and African voices or Asian voices from the conversation makes it very, very difficult for universities to achieve cultural diversity in the curriculum because the curriculum itself is biased towards whiteness or white cultures. And so what I also do in the classroom, like I do is to encourage, like, how can I say, like a flipped kind of lecture system where like students, instead of just coming and I speak at them for 2 hours, I go into the classroom and I just pose a question and I encourage that healthy debate for students to actually be able to engage. They first engage in small groups, which is always very useful, and then they feedback or even have a debate with each other on all these aspects. And what that has done is students have come back and said that is a very rich way of learning, because they've been able to understand issues that they couldn't have understood before, or they've just been able to express themselves and they've felt like they actually matter in the conversation when it comes to the curriculum. Another way that I've done it is like this. I have collaborated, for example, with the University of Manchester. So when I'm supposed to teach on decolonization, decolonization, as we know, has become more of a trope, and it's very difficult to sort of like encounter or express what exactly it is, although its aims is to diversify the curriculum and allow these silenced voices to come into the conversation. There is no one way of doing decolonization. And if you're teaching students who perhaps 90% is from a white background, who have not come from histories or where colonialism has happened, or who have not come from like war-torn countries, who don't understand the effect of colonial violence or just violence on people's lives, it's very important to then have them start from a place where they all understand each other. And that's where the museums have been very, very interesting. So working with the museums, we go to the museum and then we have a curator who comes and speaks to us about what the university does. So the university there's something called Living Cultures Project. And what it does, it supports repatriation of all the artifacts that had been stolen during colonial era, and allows that rebuilding of relationships with communities. And that has been mostly a staff affair, like staff are the ones who've been involved, and students hadn't been involved in that sense. But having students interact with these processes that are already ongoing in the university has allowed for very, very interesting dissertations from students, for example. So we have students who are now, yes, they're not from that kind of background, but they are so interested that they're studying things to do with race. They're studying things to do with colonialism. They're studying things to do with they're critiquing the curriculum by itself. And that is something that is very important, because when you have that student voice, and we're talking about diversity and inclusion, we cannot have it. It cannot be effective if the people whom we are talking to do not really understand where these narratives come from or where these discussions come from. And also just something else that I would also like to say is that we also, like, for example, I also work closely with the Royal Geographical Society. I have been invited to sort of like give a lecture to high school students. And what you notice about the UK curriculum or high school curriculum or school curriculum is that it sort of like has a very Eurocentric view on issues. And a lot of students do struggle, particularly students from migrant backgrounds. They really, really struggle to integrate. As a mother as well, and as an educator, I do see like my kids learning about Romans, and they wonder, how are Romans important to me? And this is one of the things like we have to do as educators. Like, how do we get to a level where students understand that it's not just about Romans, and Roman history also has two sides to it. It's not just the one history, the one side that you're given. There's also the other side of the people who were impacted by it. And I feel like by doing such things, then we can then be able to have a more diverse and rich curriculum that then can be able to impact positively on students, even as they move forward. With their into the workplace. And also just talking about diversity, it's not just about students from minority groups, but also students from the LGBTI community. How do they fit in? And last week I was in a training workshop where I learned that I have been doing it wrong. And I had felt like perhaps by asking people to share their pronouns and being sensitive like that, I was actually promoting inclusivity, while in essence, having heard from people who have actually had the lived experience of being in this group, I learned that I, for example, was marginalizing them in a way, because some people who belong to, for example, who identify as trans may not have already identified whether they want to be a he or a she, or a they or a them. But me putting them on the spotlight and asking them to share a pronoun that they would like to be referred to by, in essence, I was also marginalizing them in a way. And that was really powerful. And I feel like it's important that as we have these conversations on cultural diversity, we also ensure that the spaces within which we enact these diverse programs and policies are also inclusive and also come from a point of knowledge rather than just a point of, oh yeah, we think that this is something that's happening and we need to do it. Because universities do have like very good policies on diversity and inclusion. But even as a staff member from the BAMI community, do I feel represented? Do I feel like I belong? Do my students feel confident enough to be able to interact with these policy spaces? Do they have mentors that they can actually look up to and ask questions and feel that they actually belong? So yeah. That's all I would say. Maybe I can't speak forever, but let me just
No, thank you so much. That's a really rich reflection. I like something that you said when you started. You talked about how cultural diversity really grounds our ways of knowing, but also knowledge production. And that's really important for us today as we look at curricula and how that's implemented. And it's lovely to hear how you're using collaborative spaces, open door policies, to be able to ask strategies where, different voices can come alive. So hopefully we can hear a little bit more around some of those topics from the other panelists. Mariama, what are your thoughts on this, especially looking at where you're situated now in Gambia and Gambia's education system? You're on mute, please unmute.
My area of specialty is basic and secondary education from the lower secondary. A reflection is the main things we've gone to a point, fortunately, that we have to revise the curriculum several times during my period of being a teacher. And I think my reflections are on strategies like, what do we do to embed in the curriculum something that will really cater for the diverse needs of all the children. I think whatever curriculum it should be a curriculum that will expose children to be able to adapt, to be able to open up, to be able to live in different environments. And the first one I can think of is incorporating diverse perspectives into the curriculum through literature, through history, through examples from various cultural backgrounds that we have children. Like in the Gambia, it's a small country, but we have quite a number of languages for us. Although we have 7 key ones that we use, 7, 8 key ones we're using, but you still have to have children, particularly from the urban areas, who are really ignorant of what is happening in rural Gambia, because you have the drift is from the rural coming into the urban areas. So particularly the children who are in the urban areas, they really need to be exposed. But we have both sides. We integrate diverse things into curriculum that should cater for all of them. As I said, we've done that in the past few years. The first thing we did was trying to go back to the textbooks, what we've got. How does it really respond to what we've got for the children? It's trying to incorporate the diverse needs of children, for those in the urban areas, the different types we have in the Gambia. How do they look? How do they appear? What are some of these norms that we have? Unfortunately, for me, during the primary school living certificate, we were not exposed to that. We had English language, maths, and diverse needs of those. But fortunately enough, as we moved on, and the primary 6 examination that you sit moved to the next level, when it was scrapped, when it was removed and replaced, things started changing, and different things are being thought of and being put into the curriculum. And that's what I really think, that in order to include, to everybody to feel that I am part of that, I belong, they must be catered for. 2, when you cater for them, there must be the materials that should that the children should interact with, that the teachers should use to be able to really bring the children along, for them to belong, for them to see themselves as part of the classroom. Another thing is creating opportunities for children to share their own diverse background, their own cultural background. We've got a typical and an ironic one. We do celebrate Commonwealth Day in the Gambia, the second Monday of every March. And what happens is the different schools across the country choose a country from the Commonwealth and do a study, some sort of together. What is national flag, what are the languages, how do they dress, what are their food, etc. And children are encouraged to come and talk about that. And I think that's an international perspective that the Gambia is encouraging, which is very, 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 very good. That's why being a Gambian, I really feel that that's something that is exposing our Gambian children very early to something different from the world they live. Some other schools which have problems like in exposing the children using the internet, being able to have other materials, they're encouraged to come that day in their traditional cultural clothes, and they come a little bit of food from their own culture. The children will come in, explain, today you are dressed like a Wolof, that's my tribe, and Benachin, jollof rice, the famous jollof rice, this is our main food. These are some of the things we do, this is how we dress. These are things we are doing in the Gambia that are exposing the children to diverse cultures, for them to know that in their little niche in the capital, this is not the whole life you have in the Gambia. Those are the far interior to, this is what happens. And the beauty about this now is the television goes around and do random picks and air it. So you can see children from different parts of the Gambia, what they've done, how they've come. And we have diverse people, diverse food, diverse cultural ones. Some of them dress like brides and they tell that this is demanding a bride, which is really, really good, creating an opportunity for the children to see, to express themselves, to share their culture, and for the others to see how others live, that this is not a small wall, it's a large wall out there for them to, besides showcasing their cultural bit, fostering an inclusive classroom. We know what it's like, and we, particularly when we have this urban rural drift, when they come in, they come differently, and they need to be drawn in. They need for help, for them to be helped to fit in. And it's the onus lies on the education system, the school and the classroom and teachers to open up, to draw those ones out. We've got that Muslim bit too, that children shouldn't, girls shouldn't be loud, they shouldn't be outspoken. And some of them, they come to class and we're trying to draw them out, and they're thinking, at home, I am told to behave this way. So these are some of the things we are grappling with. So we're encouraging, particularly girls, like, yes, it's normal, it's okay for you to talk. You're not doing anything bad, but you be part of the classroom, drawing them out. And these are things, conscious effort that are being made to draw children out. And we have now the inclusive education directorate, and we're working as to how well to more integrate, to be for the school, for the class to be more inclusive, particularly those with special needs and those who don't have severe ones, and they have to be integrated into the system. So that classroom needs to be conducive. It should be an open one for the children to be happy to be able to express themselves, to talk and integrate and gel with them. We do have some communities where children are really come from very poor backgrounds, and you can see the way they come to the classroom, the way they some sort of like they're trying to be close. You can see them, and those are the ones we draw out. Those are the ones we telling teachers now that these are the people you need to look out for to be able to integrate them into what is happening in the classroom. Another thing too, 5 minutes is not much, but teachers need to be need to be supported. Continuous professional development. When these new changes came in, we started with the teachers, really for them to move away from the traditional way of teaching, and that Gambian way of children should be heard, should be seen and not be heard. For the children to be allowed to speak, for the children to be allowed to talk, to express themselves, because that's how you include them in the lesson. That's how they see themselves as part of the lesson. That's how you change the way they are forced to be introverts in the classroom. These are my reflections, and I'm trying to connect it to the developments we have from when I was in the classroom to what we have now. Some of us were lucky. You have parents who were lettered, who were educated, and they ask you how was school, and you talk and you this. Some children do not have that. And it's the classroom where they have the opportunity to express themselves, to talk, but teachers too need to be brought forward. Teachers need to be more encouraged, to be more encompassing, to have more of them coming in, to be able to express themselves, and let the children feel part of them. Let it be included, let it be inclusive. So by and large, incorporating the diverse perspective in the curriculum, using diverse materials corresponding with those to be able to really teach for it out to reach the children, then creating opportunities for these children to be able to showcase, to be free to say, this is what I am. I am a Muslim, I am a Jola, I come from this end. They don't be ashamed, to talk about where they're from, to be able to express themselves, to be able to say, yes, this is it. I know it's been a long journey, but I really think we are still moving on, because fortunately we are revising our curriculum for it to be competency based, because we've realized that still we have that traditional method as much as we are pushing, but we're working in a way that children will be able to utilize what they learn in the classroom in everyday life. Like, for example, I have a nephew came in with a tissue and just threw it outside. I said, pick that one up. He said, but auntie, this is not the classroom. It's not only in the classroom that you are told into the basket, throw your papers, not up on the floor. But he was telling me, like, that's what the teacher says, that's what we do in the classroom. I said, but you're at home. We have a bin. Not so. He said, yes. I said, pick it up in the bin. What you learn in the school is what you do in everyday life. That is what we are grappling with now. And as much as we are bringing them, we are putting those cultural things, we're working on the competencies of using those skills everyday life. If they're doing mathematics and doing buying and selling, quite a lot of things, those social interactions come in there. And you have different languages in the market. And when they were tested, they were asked, where do you go to market? What do you hear? You hear different languages, everybody selling in your own language. That is telling you that it's a world larger than at home. It's a world larger than the family. These are some of the things, these are some of the reflections. I think I have hope I've not gone far beyond being the teacher. When we come to higher education, I think I'll share my perspective on higher education.
Thank you so much, Mariama. You brought, I really picked on something that you said, and it made me reflect on what Nerea had talked about, the role about how teachers are also prepared for, handling cultural diversity. I'm wondering, Nerea, how prepared you are for that, or did you only just draw from your own position and standpoint? So if you can say something 1 minute, so that we can pick up from, continue with the others, but that's a really important point, and it would be good to hear from your standpoint as a lecturer. How were you prepared for that?
Okay.
Sorry,
okay. Thank you. I wouldn't say that I was fully prepared because, for the first time, maybe, yes, I had been teaching before, but then you come into the university, like my first lecture, at University of Manchester, and it's an undergraduate course, and I have 200 students. 90% of the class is white, and I'm like, actually, what I'm going to teach you is going to dismantle all these things you think about as normal, and it's just encouraging every time, because having come in as I came in as someone who was bringing in a very unique perspective. I looked at the units that I was going to be teaching, and I realized that these units are really good, but they do lack that diverse element of it. So as much as we're learning about the history, what kind of history are we learning? Who is teaching this history? Who is it from? If we look at the lectures that go on throughout the semester, what kind of lecture are we? What kind of content are we giving the students? And I realized that there was a gap. And what I then did was that I introduced like Black geographies. So Black geographies is a field that is just gained traction in the past years. And so you present it as Black geographies, and what it does is that it goes beyond the race studies. It goes beyond internationalization, because then you allow the students to then engage with this topic and allow them to see that Blackness is first of all, it's not a color, and secondly, it is not universal. There is no one Black person. We're all very, very diverse. So there's the Black Americans, there's the Black Caribbean, there's Black African, there's Blackness everywhere. So it is just an identity, it is a movement. And having students realize that this actually is not, when you see a Black person, don't just assume that, oh, they're all the same, they're all very different. And having students engage with these kind of discussions at an undergraduate level, like as the first thing that they actually have as an experience at university, I think it sets the precedent. It sets like a standard for them to be more open-minded and more sensitive towards cultural diversity as they go on. Yeah, so I wouldn't say I was fully prepared. It was all like just jumped right in.
Thank you so much. Landry, maybe we can hear from you around your thoughts on the strategies that will be employed to ensure that students from diverse cultural backgrounds actually do feel represented and valued in classrooms.
Thank you, Alice. So I think I'll share my reflections as someone who was facilitating classes for students in East Africa in a refugee camp, and these students were working on a degree from United States University, and they are in East Africa, they are in a refugee camp, and they're doing this from distance. Also, they are working on projects online to help them earn a US-based degree. And so there was these students were actually working on they were working on diverse degrees, but one of them was a concentration in insurance services. And so they would be given projects. These projects were supposed to be real world projects to kind of help them connect what they're learning and their experiences. But it was interesting because one of the project was, I should say most of the project would always be reflecting on this Affordable Care Act, so also known as Obamacare. So this is an insurance policy in the United States, and these learners are in East Africa. So learners felt as though, they did these projects, they learned about this Affordable Care Act, but by the time they finish the projects, they have no idea what insurance looks like in their own countries. So I think one of the things is really to try and avoid this kind of bias in curriculum design and make sure that the learning materials, be it lesson plans, scenarios, any materials are not very specific to a certain culture. And really make sure that the assignments that are given, the materials that are given are open for learners to actually reflect on their own experiences in their own situations. So I think this is also something that Dr. Norea commented on, to kind of really give students an opportunity to engage in discussion forums and reflective assignments in ways that give them that opportunity, as opposed to designing something that's only going to be relevant for in a certain culture or in a given country. So I think one other thing that I've done, or that my team has done when designing lesson plans for different courses, is to kind of really first understand who you are designing for, really learn about your audience. So what we would do, we would actually do like an empathy mapping exercise to kind of identify these are the profiles of learners that we are going to design the curriculum for, and so that we know who we are designing for, where they are from, and I think some of you have used an empathy map. You kind of have a map where you can analyze the student need, you can analyze their pain points, you can analyze what they are looking for, and this really helps to kind of understand who you are designing for. And also in your team, make sure that you actually have people on the team that can bring in these experiences, who have been through this and can actually add to the design of the learners you are designing for. So I think that's one of the things that's really important, to ensure that you avoid that bias in the curriculum, but also really for sure who you are designing for. So I think another thing is to ensure that you use a learner-centered approach in your classroom. I think this really helps you to ensure that the focus is less about the material. I mean, I think universities usually have books, they have syllabuses, which is really interesting and good, because you want learners to lead, you want them to do research, but give them an opportunity to do something that focuses on the needs, interests, and their experiences. And this way, learners' cultures and perspective can be very much a part of their learning process. And I think this can also has to be reflected in assignments that they're working on. I think one of the things that I've always liked in classrooms is to do peer review assignments. I think this really gives power to students. They feel as though they are part of the process. They can, provide their ideas on assignments. They can, assess their peers, and this really makes them feel as though they are part of the class. Maybe one more thing that I can share, and I was as I mentioned earlier, consulting for the University of Oxford, and we worked on an online course in refugee and forced migration studies. And the audience that usually attend this online class is from 50 plus countries. So it's a very diverse classroom. And we've had one of the challenges in the past with this Israel-Hamas situation. And so students had WhatsApp groups that they used to share ideas, ask each other questions. And you can imagine this was a group where there are students from Palestine, students from Israel, students from the UK, students from very many countries. And now a student drops in an article that talks about this situation, and they start exchanging words, and some start being frustrated. And so as someone who is supporting learners, how do you approach this situation? So to ensure that whoever is a part of the group isn't feeling attacked and isn't feeling as though they are ignored. Because, I mean, as you know, this was a very sensitive topic, and it's something that you have to be very careful about. So one of the things that we did, and that we should have done at the beginning, is really set norms and rules that promote respect and empathy in classrooms, be it online classrooms or individual classrooms, so that students understand that there are limits to comments that they add on things, there are limits to, questions that they ask each other. And this is one of the things that whoever comes in the classroom feels, I have assurance that if I share my idea, people are going to respect it, or they are at least going to comment in a way that isn't going to affect how I feel about, whatever topic we are discussing. So I think it's really, really important, especially in a diverse classroom, to ensure that there are set rules that are going to help students respect each other, keep that empathy. Otherwise, in this situation, a student, I don't know, from Palestine would feel like, this is just not going to work for me. I'm not going to be in a classroom where people are going to keep bringing back memories of, I don't know, a family that I don't have access to right now. But yes, I think it's really important to ensure that you create an inclusive environment that where learners feel as though their ideas are going to be valued, and the comments that learners put on their ideas are going to ensure that they are following those rules and are respecting their opinions. Yes, I think that's what I would share about this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Landry. That was such a rich reflection. For me, I think I'm taking away that strong message around really that awareness of who's in that classroom, who are you designing that curriculum for, and creating that, what Mariama was talking about, an inclusive classroom environment where it's respectful and people really engage in a way that is not offensive. Tanjilut, Any views on these questions around strategies for making sure that diverse students are fully respected and valued in classrooms?
Thank you. I mean, we have got to learn so many good ideas and strategies. I mean, from real life experiences, we have heard so many things. So what I would try to share, it's like the perspective the perspective from the teachers, the perspective of the students, all needs to be taken care of. For example, I mean, when you are a teacher or when you are an educator, at first you have to have that empathy that whoever is in your classroom, all are equal, all are same. And you have to know your students. Only then you can show that, you can make them feel respected, valued, right? So that is very important that as an educator, when you enter your classroom, you know who are there, from which background the students came from. So it might be, in Bangladesh, of course, we don't have students. We have very limited number of students from outside Bangladesh, right? Mostly are from Bangladesh. But of course, within Bangladesh, we have different cultural diversity from different groups. We have ethnicity, we have students with disabilities, we have very many backgrounds, people coming from. So that is also you need to know, like, who are they, and what kind of diversity do they have. So that's the first point. If you have that, and if you yourself know that why you are there and how you are going to value your students, of course, you can make sure that they are valued. So this is number one that you have to keep in your mind. And the second one is, of course, there should be experiential learning. Because there might be, of course, there should be contents, resources from many different multicultural backgrounds. Of course, the contents can be created, the books can be created. Those are there, of course. But then again, experiential learning is something that can really connect you, right? That can really connect the students with with those cultural experiences. So what we can do as educator, as schools, in the curriculum, what we can embed, I think we can organize some of the exchange learning sessions. Of course, the government to government, or there are many other ways, British Council, connecting classrooms, those are there, right? Exchange classrooms. So how do you really bring some perspectives from other countries? So you are sitting here in Bangladesh, or you are sitting there in UK, you may have one class, one exchange, sharing experience, or exchange of cultural information, those with another country. That might be possible. So how do we bring those things? How do we bring those experiential learning elements into the curriculum? That is very important. And also, like, you are, of course, in a country, there are many different people living from many different countries. So if you can invite a guest speaker in the school, right, or in the university, and they can share their experiences. That's how, in a multiple ways, you can try to do that. And also diverse role models. So you can ensure that students have the role models from different cultures. You introduce them in a way so that they can also think that that person can be a champion for me, for myself. So yeah, I can think of those examples because many of those are already shared and very important things have been shared. But these are few of those things that that I have in my mind, that innovation needs to be brought in. Like, how do we really think about this? How do we really think about those elements very nicely, and we can embed this into the curriculum, into the system altogether.
Thank you, Tanjilut. I like how you emphasize that when we think about diversity, it's not just international, it's also within our own countries and what that looks like. While you're on the spotlight, Tanjilut, can you please also just let us know what you think are some of the common challenges that are faced by educators in incorporating diverse cultural perspectives in teaching practices, and how can these challenges be addressed?
Sure. Yeah, very important question, because this again comes to, like, the educators who are there. Who are there in front of the students, who are there giving this learning to the students. They at first need to be, there might be the lack of awareness and understanding of themselves. So the first thing is that I mean, of course, Nerea, when she is there in the, she is
Have we lost? Yeah, I can't hear Tanjlut. Hello?
I think we should move on to another speaker, I think.
Okay. Maybe we can hear from Mariama as we wait for Tanjlut to get back.
Yes. From experience, the lack of materials. We're talking about when we did the incorporating all these, getting the materials that correspond, that really enriches the curriculum to be able to deliver it, is a challenge. And we recognize that because some of the materials are like when you go into the internet, when you tap in, it's more of European things you see, photographs, etc. These are some of the things that's quite a challenge. Many textbooks are like educational materials and things like that. We have a problem in really being able, trying to adapt those, trying to gather materials for the classroom, for the teacher to prepare to go to the classroom, to go look at the curriculum, prepare a lesson plan, and use those materials to enrich the children and be able to involve all the children to be able to cater for the diverse needs. That's one challenge. Time constraint, that's what you always hear. We have to prepare daily lesson plans, particularly those at the lower basic, the primary. Daily lesson plan, we need to cater for the different needs of the children, and it's a challenge. So we come with tested, preparing scripted lessons for them as the standard. The scripted lessons are already prepared for them. So all they need to do is to cater for the active people that need extra support. So it won't be a tedious one that they have to do. So that's something that we piloted, and we're going to roll it out by next academic year for all the subjects, for the structured pedagogy that we're introducing, so that it will ease the burden, answering the question at the same time. And the teacher competence too. The teachers are really equipped, as I said over there, to be able to deliver, to be able to do what they're supposed to do in the classroom, whether they're comfortable enough, are they prepared enough, are they exposed enough, are they prepared enough to deliver the lessons. That's the challenge. Resistance to change. When for example, the primary school living certificate grade 6 was changed, as I said, and so the content and the curriculum changed drastically. We had the sign standing on this.
You're on mute, Alice.
Am I the only one who cannot hear Mariama anymore? Okay, we lost you for a while. Go on, Mariama.
Okay, some of the tests that the children are using have the stereotype, because when they were developed, they didn't really take that into consideration. They were think of just what is the norm, etc. They think of what are the things that you put that will expose the child to know that it's not only this type of thing is not only for this man, this is for this gender, particularly with gender roles. So we had to go back to change the learning materials, but the resistance to change was we're trying to, instead of asking Mariama to be sweeping, Mariama is sweeping. We change it. Everybody should be able to sweep. and the resistance to change was like in the Gambia, you don't expect boys to sweep, but we were like, yes, these are like ingrained stereotypes that we need to work on, so that the girls will not feel overused, so that the girls will not feel that they're being put in the one separate corner, like for them to do the use of old traditional methods too. As I said, it's a challenge, and it's still being a challenge. You still, where the London talked about it, where you incorporate and get the children the more child-centered methods. Those are still resistant to changing the way delivery is being done. And some of the educators too, they're still struggling with their own biases, because they're still finding it difficult to go with the flow in what are the new changes that they need to go into. These are the 5 things I really reflected on, and I've got some few very, very short ones as to how I think they should be addressed. Like the first one, the lack of resources. I think in as much as we have problems with lack of resources, teachers should be able to use the surrounding, seek materials, diverse literatures. When you involve people, you'll be able to get things that you can use around the community, tap from the community to be able to use the resources that we have to the community. As we said, get people to come and talk to the children, move the children out, like some schools do now before children transition to the other classes. At the end of the year, they are taken to visit the museum. They are taken to use some historical areas. Some who've never been to the urban areas are brought in a day or two. You know, these are things that help with doing diverse things and trying to address that gap. Collaborate with colleagues, because it's not just the school with that nucleus. We were at Gambia College together, for example. I know Mariam, I know there is Momadou over there, and I can reach out to them. They're in an area where we can use the resources they have. I think that collaboration too should be encouraged. So we have some people from diverse backgrounds and things you can use to address diverse backgrounds that we've got for the children. Another thing too for addressing them is, besides tapping into the community, you should be able to adapt methods, as I said, the traditional way of things. But there are a lot of things we can do, particularly when the children are involved. It's ingenious, because we visited a school that we do bi-monthly, and we found, as we're encouraging them to do teaching and prepare teaching and learning materials using local materials around the vicinity. And it's amazing the things that children come with. And it's amazing with children, parents at the rural area brought in things that the children were asking for to able to help and use in the classroom for the everyday activity. So the teacher shouldn't feel that I am the only one, the only custodian who can get this. Open up, use resources that can help with the job. Dialogue, particularly. That resistance to change, we need dialogue. Dialogue with the children, dialogue with communities. Because if communities are not involved, we have issues. Because sometimes some parents question why children are being taught certain things. They particularly when we're talking of climate change, children are being asked to do some few projects or whatever. They're finding difficult to relate to that at home. So dialogue involving them, it's another thing. One other thing too is when the curriculum is being revised or when these things are being incorporated, all the stakeholders need to be invited. Like we are trying to do now. We have subject associations, and you have association of head teachers, association of principals of high schools. These are people you draw in, involve them in the community involvement programs, involve them in actually doing the work in incorporating the activities we have. So we should be able to address the time by scripted lesson and stuff like that, we should be able to address the resistance to change, particularly by really involving and by really training so that teachers will go out of their shells. We still having those bias thoughts. We still have them. It's sometimes, it's not shocking, but sometimes it's like surprising that you hear people say certain things and you turn around and say, oh my God, that's the teacher saying things like that. These are the things, these are the people who we need to, these are the things we really need to reflect on. These are things we need to really ingrain and continue doing so that the challenges we find in incorporating these things in the curriculum will be addressed at those 5 days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariana. That's a very rich reflection. Struck me when you said that teachers also have their own, or rather educators also have their own biases, because they don't live in a vacuum. They live in the communities where we are, and they really also subscribe to the same, norms, some of which are quite not very amenable to diversity. Tanjilut, you're back. Please pick up from where you left. We lost you when you're just finalizing your first point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm extremely sorry about this power failure thing. Okay. So what I was telling that of course, there are limited understanding and lack of awareness that may lie with the educators. So that is the first challenge they face, that they are from one background and their students might be from different background. So that is very important to know, like how to overcome that and how to educate the teachers themselves or the educators themselves to know their students better, to know their culture better, and to kind of align those with the teaching part of it. So that's number one. Number second, I would say that of course time constraints. That is very true. The educators, they have multiple roles except for being a teacher only. So they have to do they have to prepare the resource materials, they have to prepare the contents, they have to take care of, multiple roles. So where do they get those time? That if you have to understand a culture, if you have to respect that culture, and if you have to kind of bring those perspectives into your educational content, then of course you need your own time, you need your resources, and you need to get yourself prepared. So how much time do they have? How much time do the authorities, the institutions, they are providing them? So that is very important. I think there is a great challenge in regard to that. Then of course, if there are students with multiple languages, different kind of languages, of course, that is also a barrier. You just know one language and your students are from many different languages and they are not comfortable in other languages. So how do you really mix and match those needs? How do you really connect through one single language or maybe different languages, but that's like you connect to them. So they also may face some of the challenges. And then, of course, biases and many other, like the resistance to change have already been mentioned by Mariama, which were also in my list. But now if I come back to the how to address these challenges in these points, I must say that professional development is must, that Mariama has also mentioned that it is really very much needed. You just can't push this into the curriculum without giving the appropriate, without providing the accurate or the appropriate professional development for the educators. So that is very much important. And also the other important thing is to, what I also mentioned in my previous point, that how do they innovate? So give the educators the space to innovate. So there might be many different approaches. In want to their how do you feel or
You're really,
am I audible?
yeah, you were really breaking off there, but towards the end, your voice came back. So
Yeah.
carry on now.
Yeah. So that's one point, of course, like how do you give them that space for innovation and with resources? Because without resources, if you tell the educators to innovate, they can't do it. So you have to have those budgetary elements. You have to have those information hub, knowledge hub for them to access. And of course, there are several mediums now open. The world is also open for them. But then again, if there is something that you can make your own knowledge hub at your institute, like a cultural hub, a knowledge hub, then that can also help both the students and teachers to access those resources. Of course, engaging the community. You must bring in the community for the experiential learning as well. So that is something that they can overcome those challenges. They can bring in, Mariama talked about the dialogues. So those are really important, and engaging the community and doing those dialogues. Also, like peer collaboration and support. How do you make the students engage among themselves? How do you let them learn from each other? How do you give them some time out of the educational content and more for cultural orientation? So I think those are some of the ways and some of the ways to address those challenges that the educators face. Yeah, that's for me for now.
Thank you so much, Tanjilu. That was really well thought out. Dr. Nerea, do you have any thoughts, given your situated knowledge as a teacher and an international context, on the same question?
Yeah, some of the challenges that I would say that I've personally experienced and I've seen colleagues experience with trying to introduce diverse content in the curriculum is the availability and access. So a lot of educators want to bring in diverse voices, they want to bring marginalized voices, but most of the time you find that very nice books or very nice papers don't really make the cut behind the paywall journals. And so that means that their distribution is very limited, and so access is very limited. So even as I always try and give curated reading lists to my students way ahead of the semester, so that they actually understand what kind of content they'll be engaging with, and give them also weekly readings from very diverse places for them to be able to access. And sometimes if you hit a roadblock when you're not able to actually get a paper that you feel is important for your students. And I feel like this is a sort of like a university-wide or maybe an infrastructure-wide issue, not just in the UK, but across the Western world, because a lot of universities, you'll find like only maybe they stock one copy of a book. There's a book, for example, I was looking for, and there were only 2 copies in the whole of the UK. And the other copies, 1 copy each, I think one was Germany, another one, so Netherlands or something, and another one in the US. And that makes it very, very difficult for educators to be able to introduce such content that is very useful for students. But then again, access, you can't really get it. And because of copyright issues, you can't just go and photocopy the book and then give it to students to read. And so I feel like that's always a missed opportunity. Another thing that I would say is that, for example, I have interacted with students who want to do dissertations on certain topics around maybe particularly their cultures. A lot of international students always want to go back home to do their research. But there's a very long ethics process, and there's all these risk assessments that have to come in. And if for example, your country is perceived to be a hotspot for something by the Foreign Commonwealth Office, you're not going to be allowed to go do research in that area. Also, if you want to do research on sensitive groups like those people with disabilities or LGBTQI, you probably won't really get approval very quickly. So you find students, we've had PhD students who have had to wait a year for their ethics approval to actually come through. And I feel like all these, while all of them are in good faith, I feel like they also make it very difficult for students to feel integrated into the education system. Another thing that also comes in, but this is more of a policy issue, for example, in the UK, and also I think it's gaining traction all across Europe and even in the US, about migration. And migration then puts like a target on the back of international students, I would say. And because universities are required to comply by law in terms of being able to show that these students are actually attending lessons and these students are actually contributing and they're good citizens for them to be able to keep their visas. And I feel like this definitely impacts the quality, I must say, the quality of integration that these international students or students from diverse backgrounds actually are able to have within the education system. And this can be shown particularly in the classroom, because some of them, even if they're not well, then you find that they're just forced to come in because they still have to go and sign in that actually I have attended all my lessons. And I feel like that's also a burden on educators, because sometimes we're also required to take like attendance lists instead of focusing on the most important element, which is the teaching. So I feel like these are sort of like infrastructural issues, but I do understand that universities' hands are tied and they can't really do much about it. But I feel like having these honest dialogues with students, particularly in lessons, and having students just share their experiences, share their positions on certain issues respectfully, in a respectful environment. And also just setting standards in the classroom to say that actually this lesson particularly is going to touch on some sensitive issues. It's not targeting anyone, but we would appreciate if we all respect these views, and whatever is said in this classroom remains here. Another challenge that I would say is with pastoral care. We all know that we all have our positions, we all have our biases, and some students might come to you with issues, particularly maybe you have a different stance on it. How do you deal with it? How do you ensure that these students still feel welcome and still feel part of this community, even if you're not feeling competent enough to be able to offer the advice that you would? Because a lot of students would prefer to talk to someone that they've sort of like established a relationship with. And that puts educators and also students at a very difficult position if you cannot get someone who really relates to your experience and who can be able to offer you the support that you need to be able to thrive within the institutions. I also feel like there's always been a bit of a backlash towards introduction of diverse contents. And this is something that is still live. For example, the cancellation of the History of Africa course by University of Chichester sometime last year. And I feel like that is sort of like it sort of like dampens the spirit, or maybe pushes back towards educators trying to introduce this diverse content into the curriculum. And having a course like that being like one of the maybe 2 only courses on Africa, on history of Africa in the whole world, it just goes to show that perhaps the knowledge production processes that we have today are still not ready for diverse voices or diverse contents. And another thing, also in terms of staff also feeling safe, particularly, I think there was a paper that was published by Erin Pritchard on sexual misconduct within academia. And this is a live issue that affects both students and also staff members. And we know that students from vulnerable backgrounds or vulnerable groups are more at risk of these kinds of abuse or problems or issues. They're likely to face that. And if you're having a university, if you don't have enough support for these students in this context, and universities do not have like the enough infrastructure or competencies to be able to deal with this, or in the context of maybe business of a student's experience or a staff experience, I think that also then makes it very difficult for students from diverse backgrounds to feel welcome and also part of the community. That's all I would like to add.
Thank you, Nerea. That's a really interesting reflection, especially considering your positionality as a lecturer, as an African in a context that is in the UK, which really brings a different lens from what we've had from Mariama and Tanjilu. So thank you for that reflection. Landry, any thoughts on the same question from you?
Alice, so I mean, I think something that I'd like to also double down on is I think a lot of institutions have, standardized curriculum that is available to use. And I think this is probably the biggest challenge that they don't want to change because, I mean, it's cheaper to like keep the same syllabus or the same curriculum every year. And I think sometimes even institutions, a lot of institutions that I've worked with have, for instance, local students at the beginning, and then they bring in students from diverse countries as they grow, and they keep the same curriculum. And this cannot work. Like you can change the audience that you are delivering the curriculum to and keep the same curriculum. So I think this is really a big challenge, and I think people designing curriculum have to be willing to adopt the curriculum. And as back to the cost and how cheaper it is to keep the same curriculum, I think also, especially for institutions that are, looking for funding to grow their institutions, sometimes set the idea that they have a lower cost per student for them to earn a degree. And when they look at how they're going to adopt the curriculum, they're looking at adding in more faculty, adding in more curriculum designers, and they feel like this is going to bring the cost per student up. And so they hesitate to make this kind of changes to the curriculum to keep the costs low per learner. So I think this is also a big challenge. And so one of the things that we have done when I was working for this higher education institution in Rwanda is that we would look at some cost-effective measures to adapt the curriculum without necessarily increasing the number of faculty members. So for instance, we had positions that would call tutors, learning fellows, and these are some of the students who were maybe in their final year or just graduated. And with the guidance of the faculty members could provide support in adopting the curriculum, because I think sometimes it's a very controversial strategy because you think these learning fellows don't have as much experience as the faculty members. But I think, for instance, in a situation where you are teaching, a course on forced migration, the displaced people, I feel like these are the experts. So they probably don't have the curriculum design knowledge as much as the faculty members, but they understand better the situations in their communities that they can really contribute to this curriculum design process. So we had learning fellows who obviously were not charging as much as the faculty members with so many years of experience would charge, but would still contribute to the process to ensure that the curriculum is being adapted to the learners that we are receiving in the institution. So I think there has to be a balance between obviously the cost that you are investing in the curriculum design and how relevant the curriculum is to the students that you have in the classroom. So as much as obviously we want to keep the cost low, we want to, have a very cheap degree to, for this to be accessible for a lot of people, but I think it's really important to keep that balance. So I think the other thing is profiles of the people on the curriculum design team. So I was working with a team at Southern New Hampshire University when we were trying to design a new degree, and we were hoping obviously for this degree to be for US students, but also for international students. And so throughout the process on most of the calls, I was the only Black person on the team designing the curriculum. The rest of the team were from the United States. And so imagine the situation where I'm not involved in these course, in these curriculum design tasks. How are you going to design a degree that's relevant for international students being designed by people who have all their life been in US-based learning process? So I think you have to be able to have a team that can actually bring in these experiences, and I think we try to make sure that the team, at least when we get to the design stage, has people that can actually bring in experiences, can advocate and say, I don't think this strategy is going to work for international students. So I think that sometimes is also a challenge, and are basically just implicit biases that are brought on by people unintentionally that are on the team that are designing the curriculum. So I think obviously, again, when you want to design a good curriculum, sometimes it can be costly, but at least you have to look at what are the ways that I can still have a diverse team designing the curriculum so that I have, the content that is relevant to the learners that I'm designing for. So yeah, I think that's what I'd add.
Thank you, Landry. You highlighted a big issue for us in the Global South around resourcing, and we know how budgets for education are normally constrained, and most of it goes into teacher salary as opposed to curriculum development. But I think while you're still on the spotlight, Landry, maybe you've spoken a little bit around some of the issues. Maybe you can share a little bit more on your views and experiences around how higher education institutions can effectively integrate diverse cultural perspectives into the curriculum to promote the cultural competence amongst students, but also amongst faculty. Because you've said a good thing around who's in the room, who's designing those curricula. So is there any more you can add around that?
I mean, I think one thing that I even mentioned earlier is to really build a curriculum that offer a chance to engage with real world experiences. So I think, for instance, when I was working on learning this online course in refugee and forced migration studies, we always included community engagement, what we call community engagement assignments. So if, learners are learning a given topic, instead of bringing a random UNHCR-based report for students to analyze, we actually taught them to go back to their communities and do assignments that help them to reflect on what they learned in their own communities. So this obviously might not work for, all assignments, because if you're, teaching a research course, for instance, you obviously want students to read certain articles, but also you have the opportunity to kind of do multiple ways of assessing learners. So I think it's really important to keep that reflective part of the course to ensure that people get to go into their own communities and really bring that content in a real world experience. I think that's one. And then I think Mariama mentioned this, to really ensure that you're forming the necessary partnerships to engage community organization, guest speakers, and different people to, with the profiles that are diverse, to kind of be involved in your classroom, share the experiences. So I think this is something that's really also helpful. And again, reflecting on one of the challenges that I mentioned we had with this Israel-Hamas situation is make sure that you are training the staff to respond to these kind of challenges in a diverse classroom. So, I mean, I might be experienced in facilitating classes in curriculum design, but I basically have no idea with dealing with this kind of situation. So if a student raises a very sensitive topic, how do you make sure that you are not turning them down, but you are also not allowing them to go beyond the boundaries in a classroom? So I think staff really have to be trained to ensure that they are, equipped with the necessary knowledge to deal with situations that can arise. And I think this is really inevitable in a classroom where you have a lot of cultures, nationalities. I think it's inevitable that a student is going to bring up something, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, that could potentially make someone else feel uncomfortable in a classroom. And again, lastly, I think I would say, coming back to intentionally recruiting with diverse staff members so that you can design something that's relevant to the audience that you have. So I think, if you are designing, and I think a lot of institutions are designing curriculum to be available, not just in their countries, but globally. I think this really has to match with who is designing the curriculum. So I think, again, it comes back to the balance in the resources that you invest, but also really making sure that the people are designing the curriculum have an idea of who the people you are designing for are and what they need. So I think I'd say these are strategies that I can highlight to help institutions, but also the teachers themselves, to design curriculum that really brings in those perspectives and gives learners the opportunity to bring in their own perspective, their own interests and experiences.
Thank you, Landry. Very good reflection there around the internationalization of higher education and the need to be intentional in how you recruit so that you can already cater for the international recipients of the curriculums within the higher education spectrum. Tanjilut, any thoughts on the same questions around higher education institutions? Sorry.
Sure. First of all, I would say that, of course, the diverse faculty representation is must in the higher education. So the educational institutions should prioritize recruiting and retaining the faculty members from diverse cultural background, and also, faculty diversity enhances, of course, the range of perspectives available within the institutions, right? And also to make the role models from the underrepresented groups, so that the students are also encouraged, they get motivated, they get inspired to see the role models as the educators. So this is something that, of course, can be taken care of. And the curriculum review and revision, it's always there. It should be there. What is there existing, and how that can be changed, how that can be updated. What perspective can be brought in, those things are a common, that's a continuous process, and that needs to be there, of course. Then I can, of course, also mention about the interdisciplinary approaches. So how do we encourage the interdisciplinary collaborations among departments and programs to incorporate diverse cultural perspectives across various disciplines? So like, it helps the students to see the connections between different fields of study, and also promotes a more holistic understanding of diversity. So that is very important. I feel like this is something that, of course, needs to be done. Then when I was in the UK, I was studying in the Institute of Education. I have seen that how the different days are celebrated. So for example, if it is first day of Bangla New Year, that was celebrated, Chinese New Year celebrated. So these are some of the ways that you can really bring people in, and you can really try to promote different cultures. And this is something, of course, the higher education authorities can think of. Then, of course, there are these exchange programs that I have mentioned. So because it's like, it's very much, important, and it's also very much possible for in the higher education stream to make those connection with the exchange programs, right? So that is, of course, that's in the higher education stream can be done. Also in the research, Landry mentioned that in the research topic, in the assignments, you can really give those perspectives and contents to work on. Engaging, like working with the communities. Landry mentioned that how do you really bring those community aspects, taking the students in those communities, understanding them and reporting back. So those really, kind of work really, really nice way. So then I would say that, of course, cultural competency, you can, the curriculum may have the cultural competency for students as well as for the teachers. So there should be a measurement, right? If you are really trying to bring this into action, there should be some measurement of how do you really, make sure that you have some competencies there. Because we have competency in the curriculum, of course, we have competency for different things. So how do I make sure that cultural competency is also one of those elements? And there is this accountability management, like how do you make the students and the teachers accountable to achieve those competencies. Then, of course, supervision and monitoring, regular follow-up, academically managing those issues, that how much, also I'm also in the performance management, of course, for the educators, like how much, what different they did, and how much they have brought the cultural diversity into action. So those can be, of course, thought of for the higher education institute, so that the cultural diversity can be really reflected in the higher education institutes.
Thank you, Tanjilut. I think my takeaway from your response is that it's important to have accountability mechanisms so that cultural competence is not a good to have, but it's something that we can actually also measure the extent to which we are getting there as an aspiration. Nerea, any thoughts on this?
Okay, let me just rephrase the question again. Education, integrate diverse culture. Okay. It can be done in many ways. For example, with the field classes, because like I mentioned before, I'm in geography, so we do a lot of field classes. We've introduced virtual reality, and this has been a very good tool in terms of improving cultural diversity in a way that students who would not necessarily have had a chance to maybe travel the world or go somewhere else, also they get that opportunity to visit these places virtually, and that makes the classroom a little bit more even and more equal for all students. Another thing that we also grapple with in higher education that I feel like a lot of my colleagues are also sensitive to is something called cancel culture, because diversity is very, very sensitive. It's a sensitive matter most of the time, in terms, especially when you push too much on certain issues. You're likely to get pushback, especially when you're dealing with communities that have sort of like all those historical injustices or experiences that are still very fresh in their mind, and perhaps you're just sharing an opinion without, like, you're not feeling like you're doing anything wrong because you're just sharing an opinion, but then you're likely to receive that backlash. And that then, what that means then is that other staff members or other students who perhaps would have loved to share their own experiences in a different way then feel that they can't really engage with that content anymore. And I think we saw this when over the summer of last year, when the Royal Geographical Society had to cancel the Palestinian literature exhibition. And that was something that was very, very strange to us. We were like, we're trying to promote this cultural diversity and inclusion. And with the war in Gaza now, we want to have these perspectives on these things and have people interact with literature from Gaza, so that, or just West Bank, or just Palestine in general, so they can understand like what really this place is all about, all the cultures, all the interesting things that happen in the peninsula. But then on the flip side, I feel that such an experience also had some positive impact, particularly in the curriculum, because we had students who then were able to work with staff members to create like this, I'm gonna say, artistic pieces that were then displayed at the museum, and the students were actually able to engage with that. And that was one of the things that, because of this issue, this cancellation, and because we had been talking about it to students, they were able to then feel the need to also be able to be involved in their own way. And I feel like that kind of collaboration or learning from experiences also then allows universities to be able to integrate a lot of cultural diversity in a way. And I also feel like universities are doing a good job in terms of celebrating. I think it was Tanji who mentioned, sorry if I say your name wrongly, Tanji who had mentioned about all these days, diversity days that are always there, and it's a welcome thing, because we have Disability Month, we have LGBTQ month, we have Internationalization Month, we have all these months that we then celebrate diversity. And what that does is that it puts it on the radar of all staff members and students. And that then also promotes that inclusion, like students and educators also feel like they need to include this in their curriculums. And I feel like personally, what I've done in the classroom is just to then get students to have debates, like have like a debate session, which is like your assessment, to talk about diverse issues, whether you're talking about bodies and embodiment, whether you're talking about internationalization, whether you're talking about migration, all these sensitive elements that perhaps you wouldn't like, it wouldn't be like something that you have over a cup of tea with someone on the street or someone somewhere else. But then within the classroom, students feel safe to engage in these debates. And I feel like that is the way curriculums need to be. They need to be open-minded. They need to be able to integrate all this positionalities, all different positionalities that we all bring on board when it comes to the classroom. Another thing that I would talk about is maybe the universities within their, how can I say, within their diversity projects, such as Athena Swan, which is trying to get more women into STEM subjects, or like Stelify, which tries to get students from underrepresented backgrounds into higher education, or like to grow within higher education. Perhaps more collaboration with industry on this aspect, so that we're not just seeing collaborations in terms of engineering, but we're also seeing collaborations in terms of cultural diversity. How can we then send maybe students from minority backgrounds to an institution to then go and work with the equality and diversity lead to be able to influence not just things in the classroom, but also practical experience out there? Because I feel like that way we will be bringing out like well-diverse and well-learned learners. What else? Also like things to do with peer assessments. Like at Manchester, what we do is that we now have like a teaching and learning team, which then brings students to be able to participate in the curriculum development in all courses, in all schools at the university. And what has meant for this is that students have been able to feel valued. They felt like their voices are being heard. And while it's still in the early stages, you can always see that the curriculum or the way the university perhaps had certain issues, or maybe all these curriculums that were already in place, we're seeing that they're being phased out, and the university now is open to assessments that are not traditional essays or exams. Our students all do open book exams now. They take them home because they recognize that not everybody is the same. Some people might need more time to be able to do this because maybe English isn't their first language. Some students might thrive better in group work. Some students might thrive back in presentations. And so having all these, the university incorporating all this, or allowing educators to have all these diverse assessments is something that I feel has been able to contribute very strongly towards cultural diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Nerea. Mariama, if we can come to you on the same questions, how can higher education institutions effectively integrate diverse cultural perspectives into the curriculum to promote cultural competence among students and among faculty?
I'll start with my own experience. As a Gambian from that small country, I've never traveled. My first, all my qualifications I've got outside the Gambia. From school, and started teaching a little bit and transported to Sierra Leone Street. I had problems in speaking the pidgin language, that is the broken English that is being spoken. You know, I had problems in like, this was an opener. If they hadn't had some of the activities that were organized for the first year, from matriculation right down, it would have been very tough for me. But I was a bit fortunate because I found some Gambians, and I went with 2 other colleagues. But it really opens up for us, really, because we had the opportunity to travel across Sierra Leone, to be able to see really actually not just Freetown, how they live, how the mining areas, where the gold bits are, whatever is happening. It was really good that they had opportunities provided by the institution for us to really open up, for us to be able to connect with our colleagues, because we had some people from Cameroon, we have some Liberians, some Gambians. You know, it was.
Mariama, we can't hear you. You're speaking. Mariama, are you still there? Okay. We seem to have lost. Is she back?
Okay, back on. To the
No
point,
problem.
imagine you don't see anyone of color. The year 2000, when I went in to do my professional degree, But the university went all out to have programs that will connect us with the other world. There's some sort of an African society was formed with a few of us, about 10, 11 of us, the whole university. We have more Asians, even they were a bit more than us. But when you look at them, they were about 20-ish or so, because you see a few of them. But the integration program that we have put in help us, particularly me with the Chinese, because when I was looking at them, I cannot distinguish who is a Chinese and who is something else. For me, I was seeing the same people. But the international days that were organized, where you put on your own clothes and cook a dish, just like it's very close to what we have for Commonwealth here. You know, go in, the lecturers come in, you showcase your food, talk about your culture. That was really, really, really good. I learned a lot about the Asians, because that was the only opportunity ever. I never had it where I was in the Gambia. Another thing too, I think universities continue doing, we were paired up with families. Some of us, you know, had families that we paired up. When we had that international day, they were invited, they come in, and it's some sort of like balloted. Whoever you get, that's the family you go to. And some of those relationships are endured from 2000 today, 2024. We are communicating with some of them, they're like family. We had the opportunity to go in and live with them, spend the weekend, you know, see something different. For me, I was lucky to be taken as remote that time, as remote I felt. I was in Newcastle, right over to Rothbury, between Newcastle and Scotland. And it showed me the landscape, proper landscape for England, what it was like, etc. I think the shadowing that was being done to when we went for the Commonwealth Fellowship, I had the opportunity to look at how schools are really run, the ethos, how children are treated, totally different from when you have the teacher in the classroom in Africa, and how we relate with our children. I think some of these things, special modules, and like that will encourage that diversity, multiculturalism, for people to be able to be exposed to others that are happening. I think it is happening, but it could be reinforced. Looking at what we have in the Gambia, we have only one university in the Gambia. So people all over the country come down to that level. There are programs. We have societies, we have the debating society, the climate change or social and environmental studies. They are there. But the best bit of it has been said by Tanjilu, is the interdepartmental, interfaculty collaboration that is happening in research, in doing things. I think that is one thing that really needs to be really nurtured, because I've seen that it needs to be nurtured so that they're able to really diversify, where they expose students more to something different other than what they're living. And at the end of the day, as I said, if you don't expose them, if they will not be global citizens as we are campaigning for now. And that is really one thing that we need to, for higher education particularly with education, the teachers that are coming back to the system, that should really be reinforced. So that when they come back to the system too, they would have really, that those biases and that narrow-mindedness would be mitigated. I think a lot can be done at the higher education level to integrate diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariama. I'm conscious we have just about 15 minutes left to conclude. I would like to pick on you again, Mariama, just quickly, one point reflection so that others can also speak on the same point, in terms of thinking through how can higher education institutions also collaborate with either communities, cultural organizations, and students to enhance the cultural competencies within the curriculum.
I think with that one, my reflection when I thought about it, is not no was using the community, because I've seen the University of the Gambia doing it, inviting some political scientists to come to the university to talk to the society that deals with that. Some of the politicians, we have very one. Some of these people are so they are going and they're willing, and that needs to be, they need to capitalize on that in getting them to come to the university, and for the university to move out to when they're asked to do projects that will expose them to different communities where they'll have to move out, be with them, see exactly what happens, and work on that and bring back to share. I think that is something that is really, really key. Allow them to go out there, learn, and come back and share with their colleagues at university level. I think that is something I really, really would really like to see continue, though it is done in bits and pieces. And some of them, the students are the ones who really push for what I've seen in the game. Students are pushing really for it to take hold. Because when they engage the faculty heads, they're willing to. But really, it should be something that should be ingrained, where really there's that bit of collaboration. Use the resources we have around, either people or centers or ministries or workplaces. Let us use the resources we have around in the community for the children to be, for the students to be exposed to really see what is happening, and the professionals in certain areas to be invited to be able to really prepare them for the larger world. Thank you. One, I'll stay on that one. Maybe when we come around, 5 time permits.
Thank you so much, Mariama. Landry, any thoughts on the same questions around potential collaboration with diverse communities, cultural organizations, and students to enhance cultural competences within the curriculum?
I mean, I think one of the things that I think some universities have done is to do inter-university conferences. There was one called the Dictation Collaborative that happens at the university in Ghana, HSC University, which I've attended a few times, and I felt like that was really a great idea because it was an opportunity to bring faculty members, curriculum designers from different universities across Africa to share experiences. And I think obviously they would select speakers on different topics, which I think was really a great strategy because because that provides an opportunity to for instance, include cultural diversity or these other topics as a part of the conferences for people to share ideas. And I think one thing to add there is that some of the conferences, people come together, they spend a day or two having workshops and that's it. And there is no, like, they basically don't keep connections after the conference. So one of the things that we've done is that we've kept WhatsApp groups of people that have attended these conferences across different cohorts. And if a university is having a talk or a workshop, they actually share that link on the WhatsApp group that people can actually keep, joining these sessions at different universities. Because I think one of the challenges, obviously, when you are preparing a conference like this and people have to be there in person, which I think is very important, but there is a cost attached to it. So a lot of times you have an institution register with a fee, for instance, but how can you build that connection in person, but later have ways that people can keep, having conversations without necessarily coming back in person, which, would be expensive to some faculty members and universities. And I think the other thing is to actually involve community-led organizations in the conversations. So for instance, when I was working with a US university, and you had partners that they were working with in different countries to help refugees have access to their degree. And one of the partners that they had was actually an organization that was led by refugees themselves. So, and I felt that that was a really an amazing idea, because you have a partner that you are working with, and is actually on the ground and is connected to refugees, and the leaders are refugees themselves. So I keep emphasizing the fact that obviously sometimes as faculty members, we have the experience in designing the curriculum, but the people we are designing for sometimes are the experts. So we have to find ways to bring them into these discussions, and probably they don't, design a lesson plan, but they are involved in conversations that happen before you design that lesson plan. And I think this can really help ensure that it's an easiest way, I think, to bring in these perspectives into the curriculum design process. Thank you.
Thank you, Lan. I really like the example of the community-led organizations being part and parcel of that, because it really gives it credence to the role of people who are affected by some of the issues having a voice on how we shape curriculum around issues affecting them. Nerea, what are your thoughts?
Oh, thank you very much. I think it's very important, these collaborations, especially, for example, when I was still a PhD student, there was this community of, I would call them communities of care, that we established amongst us, different PhD students from different universities. And the network is still, it's a network. So we registered our network on JISC, which is a mailing list, and the network is still existing. So it's called Women Doing Field Work. And what that meant was that we would be able to share our own experiences of going out in the field. What challenges did we face? Encourage each other, read each other's work. And I feel like that kind of care community of care allows students to then thrive in their own environments at the university. And then, because this network still exists outside, even after we've left, we're no longer PhD students, but other PhD students have joined in, I feel like that kind of collaborative sharing is still very, very important. Also, something that I've seen working very well in terms of allowing students or these diverse voices is the university, Sheffield Hallam University. They have something called listening rooms, and I was fascinated by that, because it was something that, like, they have these rooms, and maybe once a month students would come in, and it would be a student-led session. So students would sit there. They would have been given cards on what they would be talking about, but there would be no lecturer in the room, like no staff member in the room. They would just have a microphone there, and it would be recorded, but they would have control over what they wanted to be recorded. And what they would do is they would share their experiences of being students at Sheffield Hallam, and what it means to them, how are their curriculums representative of who they are, what can the faculties do better to enhance their experience. And what then happened was later on now, some members of the academic, some members of staff would then analyze this data, and then working collaboratively with administrative staff, then they will come up with measures to be able to address some of the challenges that these students are facing. And I feel like that is something that can be replicated in a way, because giving students that space and that opportunity to be able to speak amongst themselves around the challenges they face as international students, or even as students of color, or even as students from the United Kingdom, but who are from very, very diverse backgrounds. I feel like it's a very good space in terms of allowing that cultural diversity to actually take place in classroom. And something else that academics have been fighting for over time is the rewarding excellence in terms of recognizing diversity when rewarding excellence, not as a token subject, but as part and parcel of the growth that universities have to make in terms of ensuring inclusion and diversity. And I feel like that is something that, for example, University of Manchester has been trying to do, where there's been introduction, because a lot of staff members are either on teaching and research or teaching and scholarship. And when you're on teaching and scholarship, which means you're just teaching, you don't have time for research, it is always very, very difficult to then advance your career within higher education. But then allowing these kind of rewards to actually be able to be reflected in the hiring and promotions process, I feel like it makes it possible for people who have not been able to publish, who are mostly, you find a lot of those people from like diverse backgrounds. It gives them that opportunity and that equal platform to also be able to become competitive in these processes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent examples there. Tanjalut, you will close for us this question.
Yeah, thank you. I have just listened to so many nice experiences and ideas. So for me, I think to connect with the communities, of course, this is very important. And this can be done, of course, through many ways. One could be the establishment of cultural resource centers. So at the campus, if you have cultural resource centers, and if you can invite people from different communities to come there, to have talks and to kind of sharing their experiences and also sharing the resources in those cultural resource centers, then of course that can be beneficial for all, and that creates a bonding between the community and the institute. So that is one way. I can remember in my university back in Bangladesh when I was there, so we had different clubs, and those were like division-based clubs, like we have 9 divisions. So Khulna, that's a very southern division with Sundarbans and everything. So there's one club of Khulna division, and there's one club of Chittagong, which is a hill tracts in the southern, but like southeastern part. And then we had one club for Sylhet, which is a tea garden and hilly region, So what happened then, interconnectivity within those clubs, that was also very interesting. So I really liked that. It was in the University of Dhaka. So those also can, people from that origin, they are the members of these groups. They come there from their communities, they bring their experiences and they share with others. So that in a way, can have the option of mingling, sharing experiences, all those. And of course, continuous dialogue, doing the research projects, going to the community. So those are the ways. And of course, creating a long-term commitment. That is also very important, like how you are really building that connection with the community for the long-term benefits for the kind of a long-term relationship with those communities. So that is also important to understand and to cultivate. So those are some of the points that came into my mind.
Thank you so much. What a way to conclude, especially the point around long-term commitment to cultural diversity. I think it's not just for higher education institutions, but for all of us in the work that we do. We have unfortunately have to come to an end to this discussion. It's very interesting. We could go on and on forever, but I want to say a big, big thank you to all the 4 panelists for sharing so selflessly on your experiences, on your perspectives around this interesting topic of cultural diversity in curriculum. We really appreciate both the international and the national outlook that has been shared within the conversations. And it's given us, some of us, especially myself and the work that I do, some food for thought on how we work with teachers, how we work with young people in a way that is also sensitive to the cultural diversities of the different groups that we work with. I also want to say thank you to the audience, very patient, who've also listened very attentively. And I hope you've also come away with something to inform the work you do, the ways of working that you use in your different contexts. I want to conclude by reminding people of some very interesting sessions that are happening tomorrow. In the morning at 10 a.m. GMT time, we have the Diversifying Leadership Workshop. Please don't miss that. It's going to be very interesting if you're looking at diversity and inclusion within the recruitment context, and looking at how, alumni from different contexts who are about to take their first leap into leadership roles. That will be a very interesting session. We also have another session at 1300 hours GMT on career workshops, facilitated by Dr. Maina Gioko, a fantastic facilitator that I've had an opportunity to work with before. So I hope you will all turn up for that tomorrow. But for me and from the team, MICE and the rest of us in British Council, huge, huge thank you to all the panelists as well as to the audiences. Thank you so much, everyone. Feel free to leave the session at your pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
Thank